All right, welcome, my friends, to Commander's Horn Podcast, episode 91. I'm your host, McBeard, and I'm going to be joined by you, as many people who want to join in the Commando Lounge on the Commander's Horn Patron Discord, also known as my Twitch sub-Discord, which is you can access that by integrating your Twitch and your Discord to hook up that way if you haven't hooked up. I believe Patreon gives you access automatically. I've tested it 100 times, and if it's not doing that, I am at a loss. I'll get somebody on that mystery right away if that's not the case. But we of course are supported by our commandos, our patrons at patreon.com/commandershorn, and it is a pleasure to do this roundtable. Now, this roundtable was a pop-up kind of really good idea, a little late, so it's like kind of short notice kind of thing. So people that maybe would want to join maybe didn't have a chance to prepare or make time to join. So let me tell you right now that as soon as another big news drop occurs, such as more footage that shows off more, or perhaps an open streaming situation from a PTR, where more information is available, or just a straight up stream from CD Projekt Red. Whenever we have our next big news drop to talk about, because we have a lot to talk about this time, I will do another one of these, and I will make sure that as soon as I know about that news drop, whether it's a developer stream or some kind of streaming event of some kind, or streaming open season of some kind, I will schedule the roundtable on that day of that news, and it will be the next available Thursday, and you guys can all join in. And this is kind of a test run for that, because we do have stuff to talk about. And I'm going to jump into the Commando Lounge right now, and we're going to start things off because, hello, WesCisa. It's been a while since the first Commandos roundtable, which you joined in. How's it going, Wes?
It's going very well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time. And I was on the first one, too. I remember that.
Yeah, you were on the first one, and you are an early mod of mine. In fact, I think your engagement with the channel was around the time where I thought, if I wanted mods, I want people like this. So, Wes, I got to say, you have great taste in music. You have great taste in jokes as well. So it's great to have you on the channel. Anybody who wants to come into the channel on Discord, you can jump in. I know, Gulo, you're around, and Gulo, if you can't get in, let me know if there's a problem. But you're able to come in. But I can talk to you, Wes. So, I mean, what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the huge Challenger event that just occurred on the weekend, in which Skellige was really represented quite well, I think, and we saw a new ring bearer? You want to start with that, perhaps?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a shake-up of the meta. There's a lot of stuff that, I was hearing, I don't play Gwent too frequently anymore, but, yeah, it was a lot of people saying that the meta was going to look very different. So have you noticed a change in the meta, or some of those Challenger decks popping up on the ladder already?
So that's the thing. I mean, I haven't seen much of the ladder yet, but I've seen, Full Test is really popular right now. I think that Full Test is just kind of showing up right now. I know that there are some big decks that are at the top of the ladder the top of Gwent DB right now. So you've got Tailbot's list, and I know Anivia Please, fellow Torontonian, has also dropped just a great Grandmaster Full Test list I'm really excited to dig into. And also the Full Test, the meta in Challenger, if you maybe missed the Open, the meta in Challenger was everybody was still bringing Full Test with the exception of Tailbot, who brought Hensel. But everybody brought Full Test at the previous tournament 6 weeks prior, and it was everybody had Vernon in that Full Test, and everybody had Ronvid in that Full Test. But then in the Challenger, Gulo X2, I hear you. Also, in this Challenger, Full Test was showing up, but no Vernon anymore, no Ronvid anymore. Machines were but everybody had made that change kind of at the same time. So it's like a switch trigger. So that was like a big thing. But then, of course, there was some pretty crazy, greedy weirdness from the Team Aretuza boys. But I want to say hi to you, Gulo. How you doing, man? As a Skellige fan, I'm sure you loved the Challenger. Is that right?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was everything I could have hoped and dreamed for. It was beautiful.
And how does everybody sound, by the way? Because I got a little bit of Spotify on. I may just turn that down a little bit. And I have my desktop audio. I can turn that up a little bit. fact, this is still really loud, actually. I'm going to turn this way down. Just want to make sure you guys are well heard. But yeah, so you are how many wins at this point, Gulo? Nobody has more wins on Skellige than Gulo, and I can say that without even checking the facts. How many at this point?
I think I'm around 4,725.
4,725. Wes, how does that sound to you? And maybe a rational, sane person.
Pretty high.
It's pretty high up there. And Gulo, you stream a ton, but you don't even stream Gwent all the time anymore, and that's still probably even more games than people may have even logged, period.
Probably, yeah.
What have you learned from 4728?
It's countered by 28 monster wins, so it evens out.
It evens out. So you have played other factions, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crushing 92 in the chat saying he has 4790. I cannot believe that. That's crazy.
Nice.
I'm super surprised that there's somebody who has more.
That's very nice. I'm just trying to hit 5,000 by homecoming. That's the plan. Well,
I think you can do it. I mean, now you're within striking distance, I think.
I think so, yeah.
I think what's another couple hundred? That's a season.
Yeah.
That's a season.
It's like a weekend. It's a weekend for
Bill. Got a lot of great people hanging out in the chat as well. What's up, Joe Haggis? I see you, Death Monkey 1984. The Kier also showing up. Oleg Gwent, Natural 92, Magetta. I'm not going to call it everybody, but a lot of the people that are chatting here are subs and commandos. So it's good to have you here. So the Challenger is great. How did you guys feel about how the Challenger finished off? Because I've seen different points of view. I'm going to ask you, Gulo, first, as the Skellige aficionado. We saw two really different Skellige decks that had no counters and were able to run wild. Do you think that looked good? Or do you think that looked kind of, I don't know if we want this around. How do you think that resonated with people?
Well, I imagine you had a lot of people who were looking for something that they could play and could win, and were probably quite happy to see both of those decks. But then I imagine there are also a number of people who have been playing Gwent for a while, and we've seen this with certain decks over times, very much like a deck. If I don't have this one card, I don't feel like I'm going to have a great shot of winning. And I don't know. I mean, in relation to Challenger, I think much more of it was that no one really came prepared to deal with any sort of deck like that.
Exactly.
Like, especially like the Nova Olaf Skellige deck. If you're expecting it, you can deal with it. You can make a deck that can deal with that. But if you're not prepared for something like that, you're just going to get run right over, and it may not look very pretty for someone who's maybe watching for the first time. They may think, "Wow, this deck's amazing," or "Wow, that was not so great to watch." I don't know. I can't speak for every single person that was watching. So,
I mean, I think it's interesting because when I think on Twitter somebody said, "What did we learn?" It was something like that, and I think that the main thing for me is that. A tournament without Ethna creates, if Ethna's in the tournament, there's probably a Shuro or a Scorch or an Artifact Compression or a Mandrake of some kind, a Reset of some kind. So that's a totally different story. And we saw how Witch Hunters were a real threat to Alchemy for the same reason. But if there is Ethna at all, like in the meta, or if even if Tailbot decided that there may be an Ethna list, or the Spellitel list that he brought from the previous Open, that he won, that list would have performed very well, I believe, as well. So, yeah. I mean, it's just so interesting because not only did Damorquis and Andy get their dream matchup, spoilers, by the way, we are going to talk about the winner of Gwent Challenger number 4, as I'm going to cover that. So I haven't said the winner yet, but I'm going to. So Andy and Damorquis did. They got dream matchups in the quarters. They fought really hard. Damorquis specifically fought very hard. In the semis, and if you think Andy sweeping Tailbot was not fighting very hard, believe me, he was very psyched because that was hard, and those were closer than they looked, those games. But then finally, you have the finals in a mirror match where the cards that make the difference made the difference for Damorquis. I thought it was an awesome event. I mean, Wes, how did you feel? Like at the end, Magua and I were just screaming our heads off. But, like, was it seeming like that in the chat at the same time? Because we don't see the chat.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was definitely a lot of anticipation. Well, and the whole tournament felt a little bit different than it normally does. It wasn't stuff that you were used to seeing, and kind of like Gulo was saying, the decks that we were seeing that were performing and we hadn't seen were things that are easily enough countered, but surprising. So I think by the end of the tournament, everybody was so used to seeing surprises. I mean, I think it's impossible to not have a massive amount of sitting on the edge of your seat in anticipation during that last match.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a big deal in chat as well.
And I think like there are only so many cards in Gwent that can produce that kind of moment, because Gwent is a game that's quite telegraphed when you see both hands in a lot of situations. So you can look and say, well, this is the winning play probably. But cards like Last Wish and Dijkstra specifically create those moments, because once the Dijkstra came down and drew the brick for Damorquis at first, and he bricked earlier as well, it was so close that a lot was happening, and it was happening very fast. And it was probably the most, like, one of the craziest moments at the end of that game. And if you haven't seen it, CD Projekt Red, the VOD, twitch.tv/CD Projekt Red, all one word. Check that VOD out. It's right near the end before the ring ceremony, so you can find it pretty easily. It's the last Gwent gameplay you see. Just watch those last 4 plays, Magua and I losing our minds. But yeah, overall, I thought the Skellige theme was pretty well represented, I think. And I think that we all can agree. Just trying to think of anything else I want to ask before we move into, of course, the meat of this podcast, which is going to be talking about that homecoming preview we saw right before the finals. And thank you, Wes, for linking the twitch.tv/CD Projekt Red in the chat. You guys are being stand-up kind of. Wes, you're modding and you're in the chat. That's really awesome. Thanks a lot. Again, anybody in the Discord that's available, or anybody in Twitch chat that's part of the Discord, any of the subs, as we get Boost 77 with a resub. Thanks so much, guys. We are keeping some of the sound effects it's kind of a half stream, half podcast, because I want to talk to you guys, and I know you guys like chatting about the events after I come home, and I haven't streamed since because I don't know. Gula, you're in Detroit, right? How hot was it yesterday?
For those in the Celsius persuasion,
yes.
Around 35.
35-ish, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have AC. So, and when I stream in this little office, even now, and I don't have Gwent running, that's why I didn't have any like fancy moving graphics for the startup. Because if I have a game running and a stream running, I start cooking, and I don't want to be I don't want to be medium rare by the end of the podcast.
Yeah, it was ridiculous yesterday.
Today the temperature broke. Oh man, I opened the door this morning, got up nice and early around like 7 o'clock. Just stood outside for like an hour. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Oh, is Death Monkey 1984 joining in? Death Monkey 1984. I met him at both Wild Hunts. He's a fantastic dude. And if you are not, you should have access. You should have access. We'll get you sorted out. So, in addition to some amazing Gwent gameplay, so one other thing is, just about Gwent Challenger before we start talking about Homecoming, the stuff you should see if you didn't watch it. The first series between Tailbot and Game King is a masterclass in playing.
Oh, yeah.
An absolute masterclass. I won't even spoil the outcome, even though you know that neither of them go the distance because we're talking about Damorquis winning. If you don't know what happens in that quarterfinals match, just watch it. It's the first match. Now, this one is also easy to find. First match of day 1. What did you guys think about that one, if you had any opinions on that one? Because it was just start to finish, I thought.
I thought it was one of the best tournament matches that I've ever seen. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Partially for me, just recognizing how many steps ahead those two guys are for me in relation to playing Gwent, and just seeing that play out against each other was intense. It was beautiful. And
not knowing the deck list for sure too. That's another reason why that one was so intense. I mean, Damorquis' 3-2 later on in the series was also intense against Koloman, who knew all of his tricks. But when you're still kind of feeling it out, especially Tailbot bringing Brewer and Henselt when no one else did. So Game King, maybe it caught him a little bit off guard, but those games were so intensely close. Like Gwent saying it was super intense, and Wes has to check the VOD. But at least you have your homework, Wes. At least you have your homework. You got to see it.
Yeah.
You got to see it. And then, of course, Hitchhiker, thanks for the cheer. Hitchhiker dropping a note in saying the first challenger and last challenger were both defined by go tall carryover decks. It's true, yeah, because Hitchhiker's talking about the first challenge, and I believe you're talking about Consume with the old monster passive that kept things on the board if it was the last unit you played. So not only was Consume broken kind of already, but it also was additionally broken by the monster passive. So yes, that's good. That's a really cool little observation. Thanks, Hitchhiker to Galaxy, for that one. I like that. So of course there was also the Homecoming preview. Now, I have my browser. I think I can. This is gonna be tricky because I have my browser set up on the other side of the screen. But we can go through it. I kind of want to talk first, so allow me just to one moment. Just go to this screen here for a second while I have to actually shift windows. So we should be looking at. There we go. So the first thing, so this was of course presented by this was of course, I mean, we could go frame by frame even with the history of this video. This video under an assumption here was recorded for Gwent Open number 6, which had the infamous delay of Homecoming information. Now, here's Paul and Luigi. Paul's sitting in a Gwent Open shirt, and in Warsaw at CD Projekt Red Studio, the assumption could be made that everything here was being spoken to with static images that had videos added later. That's not really news, but that's still an important part of the history of this preview. So just in general, without getting into details, everybody in the chat here, everybody in the Discord, I'll start with Gulo. Was it as cathartic for you as it was perhaps built up to be, not just by the delay, but also by the general wait that we've had to wait? When you were done watching it, did you feel excited for the future or disappointed? And I want a fresh, honest, hot take.
I was excited. I was ready to go. I'm like, give this to me now. I want to get right into it. I want to jump into it. I loved what I saw. I loved it, and I am so looking forward to it.
Okay.
I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I looked at and I was like, I can't even think of anything right now that even made me think I wasn't going to be looking forward to it. So
that's good. I mean, that's a good mindset to be in. I share a similar mindset, but I will address the concerns that I've seen from the community as we go through this, because not everybody thought everything was fantastic. But of course, we all know, all of us as rational thinking, logical human beings know that this is a very early look, or an early look, or perhaps midway. But I mean, no one's really sure right now, but it is definitely an early look in which things are going to change. I can say with almost 100% certainty. As Gwent has been in a constant state of flux anyway, for things to not change would be baffling to me. So we know that things are going to change. So when I address these things, some of these things might not stick around, and the feedback is important as well. Wes, was it as, I'll use the same word, as cathartic? Because I'll tell you, Wes, in the room, because we were with one of the event managers, his name, he goes by Repek. He's the nicest, coolest dude. He is so nice. He was sitting with us, and everybody, casters, everybody on the staff, all the pro players, were all seeing it for the first time at Challenger during the event. That is 100% the truth, no matter what you've heard. Not you, Wes, or you the people, you the audience. But so there was that moment that it showed the board, and everybody was just like, "Oh," and it was like the same noise, and it defied like country of upbringing, language barrier. It was all the same like noise. I love that. And Repik said to the whole room, "God, I wish I got that on video," because he just didn't. He could have had his phone out and captured that moment. But that was the moment when we saw. Well, no, it wasn't even this screen. It was when we saw the board screen. But Wes, like, how did you feel? How do you like echoing the question that I asked Gulo? Did it bring an air of excitement? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely brought an air of excitement. Okay, so I'll put it this way. It wasn't a cathartic moment for me where, I felt like all of a sudden everything, it wasn't cathartic, to use your word.
Sure.
But then again, I also know that if I was in a similar situation that you were in, like surrounded by a bunch of Gwent players, that I could get excited. It's like the way you never laugh as hard at home as you did in the movie theater.
Yeah,
being
that's a really good
around
point.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I would have had like that jaw-dropping moment, if I had been with more people. As it was, it didn't actually like blow me away, but I also know we weren't seeing that much of it. Nothing turned me off by any means. And I've got so much trust in CDPR that from what I did see, even though I wasn't like blown away or immediately saying, oh, this is going to be the best game ever again, I have complete faith that it's going to be absolutely amazing. So I am very excited. It really did get me really hyped, but not in the immediately, oh, everything is going to be different way.
Okay. And that's fair. I think that's fine because, this was a very small preview. We saw a lot of art assets. We saw how things are going to look as far as like tooltip changes and the board state, of course, but we didn't see gameplay. There are a lot of questions still as to like what is like truly real, you could say. So Bojima is saying that he agrees with that. Bojima, what's going on? How you doing? But he agrees except for the hype. So yes, and Garrett, yeah, how's it going? We are doing a new Commander's Horn episode, and you can join the channel if you want, if you have access to the Discord, which you should. Again, if anybody on Twitch wants to link their Discord and link their Discord and Twitch, you join the Discord and you can hop in the Commander's Horn chat, and I want to talk to you. I want to hear what everybody's saying, because it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir right now. It sounds like I'm fine with differing opinions. I would love to have a discussion with some people that maybe think that maybe some of this is worrisome. I don't think any of it is, personally. So I feel like I need some sort of devil's advocate, perhaps, but it's fine either way. But anyway, the next thing we saw was the Mulligan screen. So this gave us some information in that we have 5 Mulligans that are charges of Mulligans. And it also showed us that we get to see our entire hand on the screen at once, which is, as it is now, but nice, big, beautiful cards. And we see that the borders are gone. The borders are very, very thin. The numbers and the icons are now represented by the diamonds, which is a throwback to old Alpha Gwent almost. I feel like just having the diamonds that's a throwback that some people may not even like really get. The fact that these cards look like the OG, get like original reveal, hey, we're making Gwent. This is our idea kind of situation. So, I mean, how do we feel about the look of these cards aesthetically? Gulo, what do you think?
Well, I know that a lot of people have been complaining about the borders and that they're not, you can't almost tell bronzes from golds and all of that, but and I like them. I think I like the subtlety. It looks like a deck of playing cards that I've been using and playing with for a long time, and I like that. It's. I mean, the current Gwent cards, they're beautiful, but they almost look more like a painting in a frame more than a playing card, and I don't know. I like it. I think it looks. I think it looks nice. It gives a nice uniformity to every card that you have for your faction on your side of the board. So, yeah, I think they look great. I mean, obviously, I want to see what the Skellige ones look like, but these look great.
Well, I mean, the assumption is that it would look the same, but with purple,
purple
diamonds,
right, yeah.
And that seems like that's the only thing. Damorquis, what's going on? You're in the channel. Damorquis, you want to join the podcast? We're doing a roundtable. Anybody who's in the Discord, and I mean, if we can do this like crazy spontaneously, I can give you a special guest tag. Damorquis, the winner of Gwent Challenger 4 in chat. It is an honor, my friend. But we are kind of picking apart the homecoming preview at the moment. We can do it. Yes, Wes, do whatever you can to get Damorquis in the channel as well. I would love to have more people chatting as a roundtable episode. Wes, what did you think about the Mulligan screen? There's not too much, I guess, to really pick apart, so much that I guess the additional mulligans is another thing that we didn't talk about. And, I mean, aesthetically, I think we can say that it's mostly pleasing. I think I miss a little bit of the identifying banners, just a little bit, like the shredded, like, you know, the golden claw and like the shredded red, like stitched together cloth or flesh even for monsters. Maybe I'd be fine with it being far, far less prominent, but its utter removal seems strange to me. What do you think about that one, Wes?
Oh, I think the whole look is gorgeous. I personally do not have a problem with this at all. Part of my reasoning is that until Gwent has an expanded card base that is like thousands of cards, like it would be for, say, you know, Magic the Gathering or something like that, I know what the cards are. I know whether they're gold or silver or bronze. That doesn't change anything for me. And I personally, I think it's gorgeous. I think about how much we love the art. And I think, you know, even as a return to its roots, or if you want to call it, you know, giving more credit to the artists, I absolutely love this look.
Great, yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, you can see just so much more of the card, right? Just in general. And that is, yeah, that generally frees things up. And I think a lot of people were saying in general, as every update, the cards seem to get smaller and smaller. And I think that, you know, this game, art-wise, it's like the only like 100% opinion. Like I feel like as far as subjective as art is, I really think that if you can't say objectively that Gwent is the best looking card game, regardless of anything else, gameplay, whatever. If you like Witcher, whatever. I mean, the amount of work and artwork that goes into these cards is just unmatched. It's the most objective, subjective thing. It's the best art in any card game. It's like
it's absolutely worth making that change, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. We had some more people. We have some more people joining us in the channel. So I am just going to. I should have maybe set this up a little better, but I'm just going to hop back over to the podcast screen so we can see who's in the channel. I see I get Damorquis in the channel. Damorquis, how are you, my friend?
I am well, McBeard. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you very well. Damorquis, I met you at Wild Hunt 1 and 2, and you were also a competitor in there. And you have a ferocious beard, far more ferocious than mine. And you're also, but you also like to wear flannel like I do. We have a lot of similar styles. Damorquis, how are you?
Again, I'm well. You're right. We do have a lot in common, I think, McBeard. You picked up on that. My beard is no longer quite as ferocious.
Okay,
right now.
It happens.
You know, middle of August, that needs to go. But welcome. Thanks for having me. I mean, thanks so much.
Oh no, for sure. I want to do the community episode. Also, Damorquis, you've been given a special guest role. Damorquis, you actually can join the channel and speak right away. I didn't let Wes know that I set that role up for such a spontaneous event that actually was going to happen. That I assumed maybe could happen. But yeah, so Damorquis, thanks for coming in. In general, what do you think about Challenger, and what do you think about this homecoming news? And are you excited to pick apart this video with us?
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting. Like I was telling Levetitiliana right at the beginning of this stream, I have been waiting all week for this very moment to hear your thoughts and opinions, and now this is just great that we get to have a discussion with the community. You know, I think, again, like you said, you were preaching to the choir. I echo a lot of the same thoughts that I think we've seen on Reddit, and I have some of the same concerns. I like generally the direction they're going. I have faith in CDPR, obviously, and I'm very, very glad that they did give us the time to take a look at this and give them feedback, because we know CDPR is going to take that feedback into consideration and iterate on it again before they nail down their final version.
Good evening, everyone.
Damorquis, the winner of Challenger number 4, as big a superstar as you can have, as close to the event as I could possibly have it. It was so close. I wasn't even sure if we'd be able to talk. I wanted to talk at the event, but sometimes after these events, it's difficult. Damorquis, what? No way! Damorquis subbing to my channel. Now that you're already doing so much for me by actually hopping on the show spontaneously. Damorquis, fresh home from Challenger, how you feeling?
I feel great. I mean, I couldn't even believe it until I came home and let everything soak in. But it was an insane series until the very end. You couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. No one could tell who would win. Like the DJ bricking, finding the DJ from the last wish. I rewatched, I think, the final like already 10 times because I loved it how you and Mogwai were shouting, "Oh my God, he finds the DJ!" And then everyone in the end, is it enough?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually watched it. I don't know if I watched it 10 times, but I watched it a lot because I needed to see like every aspect of that. I needed to see what the chat was saying. I needed to see like what was going on, and I had to hear it from our end because in my head I thought I was just losing my mind, and it turns out that I was. And also, Damorquis, your user image here, right here on your Discord, you have with lit by fire at the Challenger, I believe. Who's that with? Whose hand is on your shoulder? Is that Andy, or what is that?
I think it's Andy's. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I adjusted it. It looked nice, and yeah, I mean, I actually also looked through the chat and I saw a line when I was 0-2 against Colemon. I saw that you were in chat, and then someone was saying, "Okay, reverse sweep," and then I saw McBeard in the chat. I don't think there will be a reverse sweep, and then Stark opinion changed after a few minutes. That was pretty funny.
No, I said I don't think there will be a sweep. As in, I didn't think you were going to lose game 3 because Colemon spent Seltkirk early in that game, right? That was the early Seltkirk game. So that was the one where I thought, I don't know, I don't think you lose that one. And then it turns out the sweep was the reverse sweep. It wasn't that I didn't see Colemon sweeping you. So yeah, I can just the one comment I made in chat. I just want to make sure that that's crystal clear. So yeah, I mean in general now, so the event is all over here. And Damorquis, you've also had a chance to absorb some of the homecoming news, and how do you feel just generally? We're kind of picking it apart right now, but we're kind of already talking about the Mulligans right now because we're going through the video, but how do you feel in general the direction that Gwent seems to be heading in based on the homecoming preview?
I mean, I feel like it's a totally new game from what I was seeing. The leaders on the board, different Mulligan system, the inability to dry pass, and also the 2 rows. It's like so many things that are elementary different. So we will have a totally different game, which will like create a new competitive scene, I believe, and people have to learn from scratch a bit. But it will still have a lot from the Gwent that we love. So from what I've seen, I think that there is still a lot to be optimized. But what I really like is that there is a good foundation set. You know, when you have something that is pretty good already, but you don't really like the foundation or you don't see a lot of potential, that's where I would get critical. But I see the basics, and I really like the basic. There is so much potential in it, and I think there is a long way to balance everything, especially with the provision system. But when it's being done right, it will be a great game, even better than we have it now.
Yeah, we're going to get into talking about some nitty-gritty details like that provision system as well, and maybe even what we're seeing on the actual cards. Okay, so let's get back into it because I know that this is like the big news. There was some other news. There is some other news, but I wanted to get through this first. So we're talking about the Mulligan system, and here's a freeze frame here on Rotfiend. So the thing about the values of the cards, this is a bit unclear. Maybe I just need to see, is the deck builder, where do we see? There is no deck builder shown here, is there? So there's some info that we don't quite receive. So if we're talking about a provision system, we don't really know what each card is worth because that's not really shown here. So I think that it's really interesting, like, to look at these cards from like a quick glance, even if you don't know what they do. You can assume that a higher strength card is worth more. You can also assume that big cards like Imlerith Sabbath has an effect that would likely make it worth more as well. And with only bronze and gold cards, it looks like these cards would just automatically be higher value. So you can assume maybe Morvud would be a higher value card with a powerful effect. Imlerith likely to go along with what's on live. A very powerful effect associated with this as well. And then it looks like Geralt maybe is a vanilla card as he is currently, and this is one of these baseline cards that's worth a baseline amount. So I find it very interesting, if we're talking about a provision system without seeing it, what we can really speculate about these cards and their power level. But, I mean, without actually addressing anybody specifically, I suppose, there are some great questions in the Roundtable chat as well. But we did see a card like, where's the Rotfiend tooltip here? Just to give an example. So the example here that Rotfiend is telling us is that this card is a completely different card. It is not a card that damages units on Death Wish. It is not a Death Wish unit at all, but it interacts with units being destroyed. So in a general kind of outlook, I'm gonna throw this one over to Deathmonkey, because you joined a little bit later and you maybe haven't had a chance to say as much. How do you feel about maybe every card changing? Like, how do you feel about coming into a game with that level of unfamiliarity while still being a game that your brain might recognize as very familiar? Do you think that that's going to change is that an exciting experience for you, or is that perhaps an exhausting experience to approach it like that?
That's a really tough question.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's nerve-wracking is what I want to say. It's my initial gut response, is to say it's nerve-wracking knowing that every card, my full collection that I've built up, all of our collections are going to change so drastically, perhaps, that to the point, I mean, I think the question in a lot of our minds is this going to be recognizable as Gwent, or is this Gwent 2.0 now?
I mean, that's how I see it.
It's a big change.
I see it as Gwent 2. That's how honestly it feels to me.
Yeah, it seems like. So the thing is, of course, I think we all want it to be a great product. We want to love it because we all love Gwent, and we trust CDPR. We've seen them make some miscalculated decisions in the past, let's say, but they've tried to course correct. And they're still a growing company, and they're growing in this new direction with the online CCG arena. But so I think they're still probably calibrating, and I hope they don't over calibrate or over course correct and then make this something that's unrecognizable to us. As now those of us who have been playing Gwent, I don't know about a lot of us, but I came into it from The Witcher 3. I've been playing Gwent as a 3-road game for, let's say, probably 6-7 years now, including the in-game vanilla Gwent from The Witcher 3.
It's a long time with 3 rows.
It's a long time with 3 rows, and I'm not even worried that much about the rows. What I'm willing to, give the 2-row thing a try. It's certainly, that was the least of my concerns from the video. But as far as your question to all of the cards changing, I'm just hesitant. I'm not afraid. I don't think they'll change them and they won't work, or they'll be bugged, or they're. I think, in fact, they'll probably have spent enough time to make the cards even better in a lot of ways, and we're probably going to be thrilled with what they. That's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I think we'll probably get. But we will have to wait and see.
Yeah, but I think that I agree that there's the big picture response I think that we all have in our minds, that if this preview builds on if there's some highly critical things from this preview or from any future testing, the ideal situation is that the feedback directs things in the right place, and there's the horn sound for another sub, but it's not on this screen, so I'll say hello in just a moment. But it also the ideal situation is that feedback is given, and that feedback through testing can steer us to a game that we can all enjoy. But there's always, I think that for every player, the hurdle is going to be higher, in that the burden of, it's always called the burden of knowledge whenever you get into a new game. MOBAs suffer from this a lot. The burden of knowledge, like understanding what, and when I say MOBA, I'm talking about games like Dota, League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm. When you don't know what any of the characters do, you can get caught off guard in so many ways. And this is going into a game that not only will we not know what anything does anymore, but we will also have these frames of reference on what the cards used to do. I think that that's going to create a hurdle of varying heights depending on who you are, as to like how hard it's going to be to kind of get reabsorbed in it. And I think that that's I mean, I'm not worried about it because I know that I am going to absorb myself in it no matter what and get over that hurdle, because I too, like many of you, have faith that this game is building a new great foundation that can provide upgrades on top of it, whereas the current Gwent is almost in a position where if they touch anything, everything breaks. It's really hard for them to get things not so spiky. The knobs are too tight, I think. Gulo, you wanted your question in the chat and the CH Roundtable Discord channel was about point values going down across the board. Is this something that concerns you, or do you have a comment about point values going down, Gulo?
No, I just I think it's interesting. I actually prefer them going down. I don't know. Part of me thinks that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think the bigger the point values, it just makes me feel like the game gets more, I guess for lack of a better term, swingy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's much easier to just swing back and forth, and it makes me at least personally feel like the result of the game is less about my decisions in relations to when I play my cards. But I don't know if that's correct thinking or not, but I think with smaller point values, it's less variance in relation to something like that.
I mean, that's one way you can look at it. I always found the idea of cards going up in value allowing for more space, because there's more ways to count to 20 than to 10, for example. So there's more creative ways to doing that. But that's old school thinking, I think. I think that's old school thinking. But it still means that generally, though, like it puts a cap on, I guess it puts a lower cap on power level. So certain things, like smaller effects, it's like a stat squish in World of Warcraft. Like things will just feel smaller, but will maybe even be the same. Damorquis, what do you think about that? I heard you chime in for a moment. What do you think about lower values across the board?
I think when usual cards have lower values, it makes engines more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's like a bit counter steering to the fact that we may have a Gwent that is little less synergistic than we have had it before. We are used to the 3 bronzes limit in the decks, which has been actually used in most of the decks, which were deciding for a particular archetype, like Self-Wound, Skellige with great swords ran triple copies of different bronzes, as also Consume, and many other decks decided to run the same cards just for consistency reason. And since we have a bigger amount of cards within a deck right now, and we are only allowed for 2 copies of a card, that might be a big incentive to not include engine cards in a deck before. And by lowering the amount over all cards, engines are not being punished so hard by being played early for low tempo. And another fact that I find also interesting, it reminds me a bit of the early stages of when there was still the first Challenger, and cards tended to have lower values. I think at that point Crones are also 5, 6, 7, and not 6, 8, 6 or the Arrakis behemoths were only
and they were Igni.
Yeah,
you just put them on a row and they got Igni. That was like why they were favored.
And also you had the Arrakis behemoths, which were only 5 points but could spawn the hatchlings forever, literally. So it was also low tempo engines that you played at that point, but the fact that it was so low tempo and the values were so small made mistakes super punishing. So the room for error was even smaller than in the Gwent we have today.
It's true, yeah. It just changes the value of 1 in this situation. And I was remembering when we were on PTRs of old, when Dijkstra was being changed, I think at one point he was a positive play at 1, and he was a negative play at 1. And he did something very powerful, but the difference between 1 and -1 was so drastic that it actually couldn't be balanced in its state. So the DJ we have today is a little different, but I remember that it was just when you move one over, or like when one is the lowest number, it can mean so much. And in this situation, yeah, every tick of an engine, since one is the lowest thing and everything is lower across the board, it makes every point kind of that much more weighted. And I think and going on a system of, if there's a provision-based system based on what you can put in your deck, that definitely changes the value of one even higher, because it also means provision-wise, what is one worth? And I'm really excited to getting more information on that. I really I think that the deck building portion of Gwent, it's already been very, very important. But when you remove something like silver slots, like I'm just going to put the best silvers in my silver slots, and that's just going to be it. If you change that, you remove the idea of a slot being a card, and instead a slot being like a salary, like for a salary cap. That changes kind of the whole idea, right? Like it changes deck building to such a great extent in a very fun way. I think that this is going to be extremely fun, because deck building's always been a huge part of Gwent. I feel like it's going to be even more important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are also, because you have generally speaking, the decks are being more diverse now. So you may be forced to run several combinations that are creating win conditions within a deck. For example, we have seen like the Death Wish archetype introduced in the video, and Death Wish, which we know from experience, is usually working in like a sequential setup. So you first set up your Death Wish units, and then you trigger them and benefit from the synergies. And like at this point, imagine what happens when your deck is 30 cards and you only draw your triggers, or you only draw your Death Wish. So at some point, this deck building will be not incentivized anymore, and you have to think of alternate win conditions to kind of not get stuck at this point. And that's what I like also.
Yeah, and the assumption that lower cards are worth less, so you wouldn't want. It's weird when, like, the idea of how the game flows and when those cards would be best to be played, and if there are any solutions or huge other fundamental sweeping changes to gameplay stuff, because again, we didn't see any gameplay in this video, which really only whet the appetite, I think, for most people. I just want to check the questions list, because there may be another question we can address while we get to the next point here. Skarna asked if he thinks that our gold's going to be invulnerable or something in between, or will they interact differently? I think it seems like the only interaction difference is it a bronze card or is it a gold card, as opposed to it being silver or bronze, which so many cards say in current Gwent right now. So the loss of silver, just as an aesthetic thing. Does anybody have any problems with that? Speak up at all if you feel like the loss of a silver slot is something you wanted to discuss.
At first,
I miss the silvers.
Okay, you think Damorquis is going to miss the silvers? Gulo, you also think you're going to miss the silvers, or what do you think?
No, I don't particularly think I will. I'm assuming most, if not all, are going to become a gold card. I'm assuming maybe some will become a bronze, but I imagine to a certain extent you're going to be able to use most of those same cards. I mean, it's all going to depend on what they do, obviously, but no, I think it's fine. I don't have an issue with it.
It's kind of like, I think it's the format that I'll miss, like gold, like 4 gold, 6 silvers, and then the rest bronzes. Like there is a charm to that, and I can see how when every card in that kind of category is expected to have the same value, but even though we have bad golds that are worse than great silvers, and we have this is right from Panda. I think he tweeted about this. Panda, one of the casters, of course, Impetuous Panda. Talking about how there are great bronzes better than bad silvers, and the line is so blurry to begin with, and like when you add new combos and new interactions, it can get even more wild and crazy. So having a single slot define a card's value, and how do you make new cards interesting? How do you change that? I feel like fundamentally things had to change. I think that it would be cool if they found a way to implement silver cards. Maybe if there was a classification of card where maybe you could only have a certain limit, or maybe if they use like steel and silver, like Witcher style. I kind of always like the idea of like a silver card and a steel card, but it seems like identity-wise, maybe bronze and gold is going to suffer from the same thing, because look how close these cards are. Like, this is like an old school Gwent problem. Bronze and gold looking too similar. It's interesting that kind of panned out like this. I think a nice frame around them, like a picture frame or like just like a more thicker frame, like the shabby bronze is fine. I think gold needs some fanfare. That's where I'm at on that one.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, also what bothers me actually really much is that the cards are super dark.
Yeah.
This is like my biggest issue. Like when I look at the hand, it's like hard to really see exactly what card everything is, especially on the side. And also when you zoom in on the cards, they are still a bit too dark. In the Mulligan screen, it seems fine, but then later it's just too dark. What I really like about Gwent at the moment is that it's so clean. I mean, they wanted to change it. You can see that the cards are significantly bigger here.
Yeah.
And when you look at Gwent right now compared to that, the cards look like stamps. So
Yeah,
that's
the side by
definitely the
side
thing that
photos
they.
were so funny.
Mhm.
The side by side
But,
photos are really good. Yeah.
Yeah, what I like is that it has a high visibility for competitive play. You can look at your hand and you can just fully grasp like like your sequencing because you instantly see everything in your hand. But here right now it's a bit too chaotic for me. Maybe because I'm not used to it, but also it's not as clear as I would like it.
Yeah, so we can move over to the gameplay. So this is what the board looks like here, and what Damorquis is saying, it's kind of I am on YouTube right now, CD Projekt Red's YouTube, where you can find this video. Already 121.6K views, which is higher than the average Gwent video, let me tell you. So that's pretty good. But you can see there's kind of once I hit play here, there's like a smokiness to the cards almost, especially that highlight right there on the Ekamara. It's almost like you couldn't see anything at all. And there's all the tooltips, and who knows if any of those are final. I'm not even sure if I want to dive into the tooltips too much, but one of the things that I did want to point out is that deploy is back. I think that's great. We saw the Arcaspor tooltip. It had deploy and a Death Wish. It seemed like it was a 7 total value card with all of its conditions met. So it seems like it's probably on the lower end of what is valuable, I guess, for putting it in your deck. But deploy is back. I love that because I think keywords are important. I would be fine if they removed the words melee and ranged from the cards and just put the symbols in. I think that the more they can reduce the text box, I think is more simplicity to a game that is arguably getting far more complex. That's just one of my tooltip notes that I wanted to add from this. And it also looks like if Magic and Hearthstone have taught me anything, that ZZZ means you can't do anything on the turn you play it. So that's what I'm getting from Imlerith Sabbath and Barbagazi, which is shown as well, that they can do something, but not right away. So then we have the charge, like a charge system or an effect system, something happening here where it'll happen later or it'll be activated later. How do we feel about a multi-action turn coming into Gwent? Let's go, Wes. Yeah, I haven't talked to you in a while, and you're in the channel. How do you feel about now? You play Magic: The Gathering as well, Wes. So you know that when I talk about a multi-action turn, I'm talking about current Gwent. You play a card and your turn is over, as opposed to playing a card and perhaps now doing something with the cards on your board. How do you think that's going to feel in Gwent?
That is actually one of the things that I am most excited about coming into Homecoming, is that that is going to add so much possibility. Just the way, if you even get a decision as to, if you think about, if I could have my, Larry pop off before this happened, how much of an effect that would have on the game. And then, since we don't even know the extent to what they're going to add as far as taking actions and being able to do things in a different order, it can just mean so much. If you, back with Mirdabrack and setting up, the perfect Bork, if you think back to when that was common.
Yeah.
If you got to throw your Larry or Archaspor in there at whatever point you wanted, that could be absolutely game changing. So that is a way that I see them as choosing to make the game more complex in favor of of, you know, people that want to think a little bit deeper about the turn, which I absolutely love. It also, you know, it kind of relates back to whether they're decreasing everything and making everything a little bit lower point value versus making everything a little bit higher. When you make everything a little bit lower point value, it can kind of make those little decisions even that much more impactful. So I really look forward to what this is going to bring in the game. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what it also could do is that if you have more actions you can take in a turn, it means that if the cards and the point values are lower on average on the cards, like the bodies of the cards, let's say, the action that the card can take actually adds reach to any card you can also play on that turn. So making the cards lower actually gives more room to have other additional effects, maybe at lower point values, like the Arkasaw we saw. It was deal 2 damage on deploy and also deal 2 damage on Death Wish. So we're seeing that. Well, that's a bad example because that's not an activated effect. I'm not sure if we saw any of the activated effects, but any ping that's on a charge like that, like the Barbagazi, let's say, we can assume that I would assume that it has a consume effect, but if there was one that has an activated ping effect, that adds reach to your next turn in addition to the card you play. So without things could otherwise go very crazy, I think, if those values were higher. And I think it makes those effects more interesting. I don't know if
actually did.
Yeah,
we did see one go off, I believe, in the video, McBeard. We saw Sabbath go off at one point.
That's
and so
true.
the ZZ is the I take it the cooldown timer.
So let's take a look at Sabbath here, because I think that you are right.
That was the one activated ability they said, and I believe they pointed out that he's shooting that's when they're talking about the VFX, and that the VFX team is
and the reach as well.
Yeah, right there about with that fireball. It was that fireball, right?
Yeah. So that means that Sabbath, and it looks like there's a little
Here it
hourglass.
This is
here.
an activation.
Yeah. There's a little hourglass there, which suggests that, because you saw it was a cooldown, that this ability reactivates every turn. So,
but it may go to sleep in between, or is that what do we think?
I mean, it happens immediately after he activates it. So if it comes back the next turn and that 1 goes to 0, the assumption is that it can do it again every turn if it has a cooldown of 1, but it can do it every other turn, kind of like the timer is in current Gwent. But yeah, man, the cards look so dark in this preview. They look so dark. Anyway,
do we think that has to do with the particular board it's on?
It is a monster mirror.
Look at the shadow. You can see shadows as if there's trees hanging above the board, almost.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the other boards. Yeah, exactly.
So you can see, I mean, the board, like the entire. This is the movement of the board here. So yeah, the activated ability really interesting. So the ZZZ. Meaning that you have maybe a chance to deal with a powerful effect before it goes off. Imler Sabbath looks tame, but perhaps the fact that he can do it every turn is maybe what makes him powerful, or he's just one of the cards they had to make less powerful, because I mean, I feel like they're going to give Sabbath a fair shake. How do you take Sabbath and just demote him, right? How do you demote him? I mean, especially when you're dropping these 99 strength Skellons and Arcaspores that are also as a joke, of course. But, so what else as far as tooltips? We got the big picture of Iris. Let's talk about Iris, because there's so much here. I'm going to let this play for a moment so you can see this here. So I'm going to go back to the podcast screen for a second here, but there's so much to talk about for Iris. So first of all, this is a 7 strength body on a gold card that has an effect that if you place Iris on a melee row, destroy an artifact. And whether or not this is a joke, that it's going to it's referencing the new card game Artifact that's coming out from Valve, or that there's a new card in the game that are classified as artifacts. There's already so many questions there. Plus we have the positional. The card does something different between melee and ranged. In a previous podcast, I believe it was with Amers, and I was talking to Amers about it. We talked about this being a possibility, and I said at the time I wanted a whole expansion worth of these cards. I wanted tons of cards that had row-based abilities. In addition to the reach ability that we also saw on Sabbath, those are 2 reasons to make rows matter. The first example here, melee range positional, is limitless opportunity. And reach defines decision making based on your side. You know, if I put it here, it's vulnerable, but it can get this thing in the back. Does that matter for that unit? Like Sabbath can only reach the melee row, but is free from things that can't reach him. So I wonder how important reach will be, how important it'll be to movement to make reach, and then ultimately what happens if a card has an activated effect if you put it on a row and you move it to another row, if there is row movement. I mean, there's just so many questions here. Hot takes. Damorquis, go for it.
What's really interesting is that a big concern for players when the first info about Homecoming was published was, oh, they are making 2 out of 3 rows, they are making 2 out of 3 bronzes, they are taking complexity away from the game, and that's what I really enjoy about Gwent, that I get rewarded for playing well and utilizing my full understanding of the complexity. And when I look back at what we've talked about right now, that like the potential of having artifacts interact in a turn, then cards that have those trigger abilities within a turn, the leader being used within a turn, and you also play cards that may have 1 or 2 effects depending on the row. There is so much complexity now within one round that has not been here before. Several interactions, also dependence on the row where you place it. A round can go like several ways, completely different ways, and can be extremely swingy. There is so much less room for underestimating your opponent now than before, and that's something that adds a complexity to the game that I think players will love. Like you said, with the different row identity, finally it's here.
But yeah, finally it's here. Or finally it's back. But it's back in a bigger way. Like before, if you are new enough to Gwent that you don't remember how important rows used to be, the original idea for everybody is that it wasn't so much that units did anything when they were on different rows, but instead they were fixed to specific rows. So if you were playing something like a reinforced trebuchet, you had to play it on the siege row and you didn't have a choice. And this means that your opponent could correctly anticipate where they wanted to place their weather, which was also very powerful, but that's a different story. But like where they could basically preemptively kind of screw you if they knew that your win condition involved certain units on certain rows. This is different. I'm assuming that there are also going to be row-locked units as well, because that would make reach much more important. So I'm just going to make that assumption. But I also think that this indeed, like adding reach and then also adding multiple effects, is almost 3 times as interesting as it used to be, which people clamored to have back. So this should be very, very pleasing to most people. Damorquis, how do you feel about row stuff in general? And it's okay to not really have an opinion, because I was kind of okay with agility for the most part. I was kind of okay with the dissolving of it, but I'm extra excited now about what I'm seeing. But I wasn't on the sidelines as upset as some people, maybe as Delta, one of the mods and a guest on the podcast, has been very vocal about. Hates when rows went away as mattering. Damorquis, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty old school when it comes to how I like my Gwent. As you know, I used to I held out long and still saying that even gold immunity was something I wanted back, which is now. That's a separate topic we'll talk about. I haven't heard it mentioned anywhere yet, but as far as the rows are concerned, I think this is a great thing, bringing it back. I was concerned when it left, especially when they made the full agility change and gave everything agility. Agility was a what do you call it? A feature of the Scoia'tael faction in Vanilla Gwent, and so. I thought row restrictions were great, but I always thought, I forget who it was who suggested first. I remember reading on Reddit, someone suggesting, what if a card could have different abilities on different rows? And that is now what we have. It looks fantastic, I think.
I mean, it's kind of it's a request that many people probably kind of came to it on their own, because my original idea, like how I thought that they were going to address it, was the card has a stronger body when it's placed on its primary row, but less so if it had to be placed on any other row. That was where I thought it might go, but different abilities was much more interesting, or is going to be much more interesting. And even with 2, like imagine the development you'd have to do for 3 rows if you wanted to make this like a regular occurrence. Every card would have to have 3 separate effects. I can see why one of the many reasons why 2 rows will ultimately be better. I think, as far as developing interesting cards and making rows matter.
Even with 3, if they would have kept 3 rows, you could still develop cards that only had 2 separate abilities for different rows, and they would be locked to those 2 rows. That's what I was originally hoping for, was keep my 3rd row and get some, an agile unit that can be agile between 2 of those rows with different varying abilities. But yeah, we'll go with 2. 2 rows is fine. It's a compromise, but we'll take it.
Good.
Luigi appealed to that same point though in the game. It's as if they didn't think about using 2-row restrictions in a 3-row board.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be. I mean, of all the things that changed, and a lot of stuff changed. I think the board changing to a 2-row board presents the largest point of interest. I think it's the largest intrigue as far as the first information. But now I think it's less intriguing because I think I get it. I think I get all the reasons why. I mean, and then there's the age-old argument that if it's going to be developed for mobile, there's more space for 4 rows than 6. So I really wonder how far that played into their decision making, and I don't know if I'll ever know, because the person who made that decision, who knows, there's such a big team, and that could have been a very high level decision, or it could have been a high level design decision, or kind of a blockade in mobile development. But I think it just, no matter what way you look at it, whether mobile is coming up, anytime soon or a long time from now, when it does occur, it will be more friendly to the screen because of the 4 rows. So at least there's that. But you also could say that to give rows more prominence, reducing the amount of rows reduces the amount of interaction design restrictions, I guess. But I just don't want them to have taken away the row strictly for mobile. But I think to do it this way it's okay. I'm less hesitant about the row thing, and I have more questions about gameplay and card values and stuff like that. The rows don't really concern me at all.
Can I just say why I don't really care about the rows at all?
Please, yeah, every opinion. That's why this is why roundtables are the best.
Yeah, so if right now they're not paying attention to, or not paying attention, but they're not doing anything that's row specific, that even if you take away a row and add one ability like reach, you've already increased complexity and added some type of row interaction that was not there before. So losing 1 row to me is not a problem at all. And I miss a row specific stuff. And I miss being able to, or having to play something on 1 row, and not saying that they should bring that back necessarily, but if you take away a row and then add back more abilities that interact with specific rows or have to be played on specific rows, it still adds so much to the game that I think was missing, since they kind of reduced the role that rows play in your actual gameplay. So either way, I whether it's for mobile, which I'm sure is a big portion of what they're thinking, I still think it adds a lot to the game. The instant that I knew they added an ability like reach, I knew that 1 less row wasn't going to make as big of a difference, because they're making the rows matter more now.
For sure. There's a great question in the CH Roundtable chat by Mod, friend of the show, guest of the show, Delta, has a great question that I'm going to spin this one around the table. Would love to hear what people's greatest fears are. The greatest fears are, what do you not want to lose from current Gwent, no matter what? Or I should say that, I'm sure we're going to have to make concessions. I think that something's going to go for everybody that we're just going to have to get over and just accept it in light of a new system. But what do you not want to lose no matter what? I'm going to start. I'll start with you, Damorquis. I'll just go down the list here. So alphabetical order, I guess. Damorquis, what about Gwent do you fear losing or fear going away in Homecoming?
Not necessarily fear, but I would say I would ask what would be the worst if it disappears, and it would be probably the competitive touch for me. I mean, since those changes in the game are very elementary, And if, for example, the inability to develop synergies within a deck is so essential that it will make decks extremely draw dependent, just because you need to draw cards in a particular order, or you are incapable of designing perfect decks, which every deck is basically running cards that are suboptimal but have to be like placeholders for low provision cost. At that point, I would be really unhappy, because that would kind of make the game feel really unoptimized and very draw dependent. I mean, we already saw a few games, or a lot of people complain that there are just games where it's extremely draw dependent, Mirrors, for example. But yeah, I would just like a game where you could just design a deck that is competitive and it does what it is supposed to be consistently, and you can perform on a competitive stage with it. You can bring it in good conscience to a tournament, and you can say, this is the game plan I built for this deck, and I can execute my strategy. I can build my lineup to have a particular goal, like for example we did this open with Andy to counter a particular deck, or to just bring tall units. And yeah, if that goes away, I would be really afraid that the competitive scene will not be attracted to the game.
I mean, it's I've never been more scared of it until hearing you articulate it so well. Because, you know, yeah, I mean, I imagine that it's the game is going to change so much. I mean, the low provision cards could all be about weaving together combos, and maybe the high provision cards could be about executing. But I mean, that would require I don't even know where to go with that. Like, I mean, I feel like it's just so hard to concept. So yeah, because it's such a mystery, it makes it extra scary. It's what we don't know that's very scary, because we can only hope that it's as good as it is now. And as a quick side question, Damorquis, the meta that we had frozen, still evolving, and may even still evolve coming up to this next open. For it has to be at least this good, for them to like reboot it and be at least this good, for it to be probably immediately appealing to most of the pro players. Would you agree?
I mean, you will never be judged by your previous achievements. You will always be judged by your best achievements, right? You will always be judged where you're standing today. And it's just like when you apply for your job, people don't necessarily look at how well you performed in primary school, but how well you did in your studies. And yeah, Gwent is finishing its Aretusa Academy now, and it's going out in the world to perform, and I hope it does, and it does even better so than it did in its studies.
That's eloquent. I couldn't have put it any better. Great response. Thanks so much, Damorquis. Again, just thanks again for hopping in the channel. It's just a great treat to have you. Death Monkey, now, what do you think? Same question. Is there anything that you fear? Now, Death Monkey, you have competed in the Wild Hunt tournament, so you've had a taste of like what it's like to be in a tournament and in a LAN. So I'm sure you can feel Damorquis's sentiments as well. Is there something else maybe that you're worried about losing from Gwent, Death Monkey?
Well, I certainly echo Damorquis's concerns there. Like you said, that just shook me to my core, how eloquently he put that. That is the last thing I want to lose from Gwent. So I guess I would have to agree that's the thing that I fear the most. But second most to that, I'm afraid of losing, and this is an aesthetic fear. So it's not that, for a lot of people it is a big deal, for some people it's not a big deal. I'm afraid of losing what I call the tavern tabletop feel of Gwent. That it's no longer going to feel like I'm sitting down across a table from someone playing a card game, but rather that, and then as they've stated, we're now commanders, leading armies, which is what we were doing metaphorically in a card game. But now it seems they're taking some of that metaphor away, or they're bleeding and blending between that metaphor and by making, for instance, I'd like to just mention this, the leader is no longer a card.
Yes.
I'm afraid of what that could mean. I have no idea what that can mean. So those two things kind of connected. That because I see them both as aesthetic, but they're both obviously very connected to gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, so far
The leader more so.
Yeah, we're 2 for 2 for fear of the unknown. But I mean, that's kind of what the question is about, though, right? That's kind of what the question is about, what we don't know. And I think that, yeah, leaders on the board, that's going to be the last thing we talk about if we, because I think this is another long podcast here for Commander's Horn. So I think leaders on the board is probably the last little bit we might want to talk about. But I think that's a pretty good thing. I think that, like, when you look at a game, like, when you look at other card games, and I'll just list off one example that is more like Gwent and the other examples that aren't. So Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering Arena, Eternal, they all feel like if you just had cards on a table, like Hearthstone's middle area is just like a board, and then everything around it is aesthetic. Magic the Gathering's boards are kind of different, but they still are like flat surface, like it's like a table. And then I think Eternal is very basic. It's very much like a board. And then you have a game like Duelist, where the board is very, very much a part of the game, but it's more of a strategy game. And now you have Gwent, where the cards are. Sorry, I just had to throw a mute on somebody who was. You guys all saw it. I'm not gonna kick Gulo or anything. I just wanted to make sure your typing was down there. But just to continue, I thought real quick. What I was saying was the aesthetic feel of it. So, Magic Card's physical card game translated into digital. Most card games kind of echo that sort of feel. Hearthstone broke the mold in that the cards turn into shapes on the board. They're like circles, and they become feeling like tangible units. The way Duelist approaches it is that the actual units materialize on the board that you can move and command. But in this case, the cards are very much cards, but the board is very much not at all. It's an environment, and it seems to be very much like the game is involved more about the game is revolving around more around aesthetics there than it is actually about a board that you're sitting down and playing. So I think that that's not something to fear. I just hope
it's a concern. Let's say it's a concern.
It's a fair concern. It's a fair concern because we want the aesthetics to be pleasing, because Gwent, so far, a lot of the reasons why people love it so much is that it's so aesthetically pleasing. Like, I love the coin flip sound. I love the voice lines. I love that every card has like multiple voice lines. The art, like we said before, is absolutely unparalleled. It's a very pleasing game. Plus, if you came in from The Witcher and you love The Witcher, you love the way that the art and the aesthetics have generally, and even the events have generally handled the Witcher brand very, very well, given it great respect, great production. And now it just needs, a fantastic foundation to rebuild this game on top of it. It would be too bad if we lost a little bit in the aesthetics department, especially when it looks like so much development has gone into it. So that's all I wanted to add to that. I just unmuted you, Gulax, because I'm going to ask you next. How do I get this menu? There we go, off the screen. Gulo, is there anything is there anything you're fearful of losing in this new Gwent? It's the big question.
Well, first off, apologies to everyone. I forgot to hit the mic mute on my end for that. Sorry.
Well, but, it's live. It's live. It's the risk I take with live, and it's totally fine.
The one thing I'm interested, it could be a fear, is something else that was sort of brought up around the time, maybe even a little bit before, when the idea of Homecoming was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the idea of faction identity.
Right.
And we've already sort of seen over time some loss of that, right? To a certain extent. Maybe some of it has been needed, but I have my Shield Maidens, you've got your Mahakam Volunteers or what have you, and there seems to be a little bit less diversity between the factions, and I'm hoping that there's not even more or even less, I'm not sure the right way to say that, even less diversity between the factions with this Homecoming. I really want diverse factions that provide me diverse and different ways of going about building a deck and winning the game. I don't want it. Some things are always going to have to be the same, right? We're always going to have some sort of engine on our side providing points, but I just want some uniqueness to the factions, and I'd rather see that increased instead of decreased.
I mean, I think that I think that's a very legitimate fear, and I think that it echoes a lot of the harsh feedback of Midwinter, I think, because a lot of people felt like cards were dumbed down or they lost certain effects, and in doing that lost a lot of identity. You got your Mahakam Volunteers, and they were kind of the same as the Arcus Drones, and they were kind of the same as the Shield Maidens, they were kind of the same as the Pikemen. And I think that, when I say kind of, I mean they were exactly the same, except for tags. But I mean, I think that the real worry is that when we see things at lower values, like the Archospore is a 3 strength card that has a deploy effect of doing 2 damage and a Death Wish effect that does 2 damage. Whether or not that's a placeholder, we don't know, but we'll make the assumption that it's not because it was previewed so recently. So that is a less interesting effect than Current Archospore. Current Archospore deals a ping every turn and it jumps around the board. Jumping around the board is less important, although it was an identity for Archospore. And being an engine unit was also an identity for Archospore, so it's no longer an engine. It's still a Death Wish unit. It still does damage, but it's no longer an engine, and it no longer has that trademark jumping around that only Archospore and Odrin and Spectral Whale have. So that is a real concern, because things like Botchling and Lubberkin being removed from Bloody Baron back in the day, and then Botchling and Lubberkin having just another, it's just another tutor effect for each other, like the Witchers are and like the Crones are. And that was like one of the big things that people were thought, I don't like this. I like this different. I like this more or fantastic. So I think that that's probably a big one for a lot of people. However, I am so sure that the last thing that Gwent wants to develop towards is homogenization of factions. So what might occur is if a card is maybe lower in provision value to add to your deck, you might find far less variance there because those cards can only be so strong and do so much. But I think once you get into the expensive things might be pretty wild and crazy. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for, and I hope that those are kind of the defining things. Wes, Damorquis, what do you think?
There is actually an interesting analogy that just crossed my mind. So a long time ago, when I was still in school, I liked to play Guild Wars. I don't know if any of you know the game. And Guild Wars was just like kind of a World of Warcraft, similar to World of Warcraft, where you had a class. And it reminds me like, because as when you played a certain class, you had an amount of skills that you could put on a skill bar. It was like 8. And but you could also choose to not only play one class, but to combine, for example, I don't know, an assassin and a monk, or an assassin and a mesmer. And then you would have to divide your skill bar for sharing 4 skills from each class. And that kind of reminds me of Homecoming, because right now we have a Gwent that is very, let's say, specialized. You have this. Every deck is kind of a one class. You have the class of Self Wound, which is great swords. You have the class of buffing bears, or you have a class of engine decks, or just things that fit well together and they synergize well. But maybe like when I think of Homecoming, I think of mixing 2 classes together. So you cannot really afford right now to continue with only one specialized version, because you just don't have enough skill slots for it. So you have only 4 skill slots per specialization, and now you need to mix them up and find good combinations. And I remember that in the game there were like a lot of different combinations. You could pair an assassin with a monk, with a mesmer, or with even a warrior. Whatever you needed in the meta, basically, you could mix it up with. And I think that might be also something that we can expect in Homecoming.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting way of putting it. Also, thanks so much for the sub, Papa Bear Rage. I think that is a really good way of putting it. And Magic the Gathering functions in a similar way, where a lot of decks you have to kind of split your between the colors you want to play. You can play a deck that's all one color and you have that consistency, but you only have the tools that color provides you. Whereas if you play 2 colors, you have access to all sorts of different combos, and ultimately certain archetypes are really only viable if you combine and they become their own things. Eternal works in a similar way as well as a card game, but I think that the Guild Wars example is specifically good because you are talking about a limited resource of 8 slots and choosing to sacrifice one thing to put another thing in. Whereas in Magic, you're not necessarily sacrificing to go dual color. You are arguably enhancing the power of your deck. So I think that that's a really good example as well. Wes, I wanted to get back to you as well. What do you think? Is the thing that you're most worried about losing?
Okay, so this might be an unpopular opinion, and it kind of goes against what was being said before, which is something that I entirely agree with as well, as far as consistency.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see it possibly going the other direction. And I guess the one thing that I would not want to lose is, depending on what they do with abilities and how unique they can make different cards, and how special and or important each of those, if you got 2 of each card, is going to be, then in my opinion, it's also very important to make sure that it doesn't become, what's considered like a solved game.
Yeah, of course.
We're getting a lot more mulligans than we're used to as well. So although the numbers are changing, I think if you put the numbers into a calculator, you're going to find that it's not that much different from drawing like one card that you want in Magic the Gathering or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But one card that you want in this game can arguably have a much bigger effect than one card that you want in Magic the Gathering. So my biggest fear is that things like tutoring and deck thinning don't go by the wayside. And I really don't think that, from what I've seen so far, that they will. But that would be also a huge fear of mine, is this becoming the type of game where it's like, oh, I did all my mulligans, never got my Igni, good game. Because that's just as counterproductive as having a game where there's absolutely no consistency. So I guess that's my biggest fear, is them finding that healthy balance of, bad draws matter, good draws matter, the strength of your deck overall still matters, but then things like tutoring and deck thinning are not useless, and they're also not the only way to win. So it's a very tough balance, but I would be afraid that they upset that balance too much, because in a game like this, it can be very easy to upset that balance.
I mean, you said something really great in there, that you were saying that you were worried that a big fear would be that Gwent would become a solved game, and I think that actually leads me to a really great anecdote. Damorquis, you could help me with this one, because I play this card game that I have at home, and I brought it to the Gwent Open, or Gwent Challenger. It's called For Sale. It's a really great card game. It's a very simple game where you play to basically buy properties and then flip them for as much money as possible, and it's a quick like half an hour card game. When I introduced this to all the pro players and the casters, we ate it up really fast, but it was as if more people were trying to solve it and coming to the conclusion that there was a way that you could win it just based on looking at it. Like you can just look at the situation, or like where your position is in the circle, and know exactly what you would have to bet or how to bet to always win. And I play another game called Dominion, where if you play with only the base set, there's a strategy that's almost unbeatable. And that's another thing that it's a concern. And with Gwent right now, there are some games where you have a situation where if you have passed, you have probably assured your victory, like right there. And the fundamentals of current Gwent is that going first is you have a less of an advantage going first, and you have to deal with that. And sometimes you have to, especially with the tournament scene, you need to bring decks that are like good on red coin specifically, or can deal with blue coin. And there are some things that are basically in Gwent right now that are such mainstays that there are aspects that have been kind of solved already. They're basically functioning within the boundaries of the game in the first place. So I want it to not get any worse than it is in that situation now. I hear you on that one. And Damorquis, did you ever do you remember the game that we played for sale?
I remember it. A great game.
It was a great little game. You guys should look it up if you're looking for a new party game to play with your friends, especially if you have really analytical friends, because it'll drive them crazy. I think it was a pretty wild one.
As we were talking of driving crazy, I have actually a question for you guys. So, there was one thing that really made me feel uncomfortable when talking about Gwent patches, is there was a card called Promote, and it was back in the time when there was still Gwent immunity, gold immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Then they took the art of Promote and made it a unit. The Redanian Knight Elect.
Right.
And exactly, and making spells into units and units into spells always made me feel kind of uncomfortable. I don't know, do you have also something that you remember from the patches? A change or like a structural change that also made you feel awkward about the game?
The original gold immunity change felt awful. It felt like I had dread. But then the more I played with it, the more I stopped caring, and now it's just the way it is now. But when that patch was approaching, I was super uncomfortable about that. And it's funny, Damorquis, I thought you were going to start talking about Promote and then perhaps talk about Immune, because Immune was an effect that was shown on the stream as well. And I'm interested to see how Immune will, because it looked like the symbol that was on the werewolf was an immune, like it was almost like it was a keyword indicator, which leads me to believe that it's still that still very much has a place in the game. And I wonder how that's gonna go. But that doesn't scare me as much as what you said. The idea that we could be losing something that fills us with uncomfortableness, I guess, even though we are faithful, even though we know that CD Projekt Red's going to put their best effort into doing it, we know we're losing things. That's not a question. It's like things are going to go away. Familiarity there's going to be a test of resolve in how unfamiliarly familiar we can be with a game that looks inviting and similar. And yes, it's this game you like, but it's a different game.
We are cursed. We are all gonna join the club of nostalgia. Back in the old days. Gwent used to be great.
In my
and now we have Gwent 2.0 or Gwent 0.10, depending on how you look at it. And yeah, I mean, when new Gwent hits, I think that it will be great because I see a lot of potential already. But I think I will also be sad to see the old Gwent go.
Yeah. I mean, that's just something that you just can't let go of. I mean, that's happening no matter what. I think it's also going to be great, and I think that the exploration phase of a new game is something that, like, it's even more exciting for people who know the game to jump in and say, it used to do this, but now it does this. That's, cooler. Or, that's how they converted this card to make more sense in this system, or things like that. Or be sad that an ability is gone altogether, or a mechanic changes how an ability works. So that's going to be, every card we see is going to like trigger that little thing in our mind, like used to be this way, used to be that way. I think that's really interesting. Back in the old days. Mm-hmm. I want to throw, guys, we're about 13 minutes away from making this a 2-hour stream, which is pretty long for the podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm going to pose the same question about what are you worried about losing to the chat. I'd like to throw some responses from the chat out there, as well as I have some regulars showing up here. I see you, Kahit. I see you, Pyramid Head, aka Nubekian, Skarn, who asked a question in the channel as well. So there's a lot of people. Oh, Teleria. I see Teleria's here. What's going on? And Magetta. And of course, and Papa Bear, who just resubbed. Thanks. And everybody in the channel. Thanks so much. A lot of people in the channel for this. So I'm curious as to knowing what you guys think. CD Skarn, the first thing I'll say is all he wants to know is see what Odrin does. I mean, it's interesting because we don't really know how things are translating yet. So there's a lot of stuff.
Maybe he's referring to the note that was shown during the Challenger. There was a short clip where there was Odrin is a fraud, and he has never owned a certificate from our academy. So maybe that was a small spoiler.
Oh,
that Odrin is something special.
That's great. It's great. Also a great Witcher 2 reference.
Maybe he just spawns beer on every row. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe he interacts. Maybe he interacts with whatever beer is. I mean, there's just so many. Like, it's just you still can't. We still know so much more than we ever did, but what we still don't know. To quote Simpsons, could fill a warehouse. Julia Mira is saying weather. I want weather to stay a viable thing, even if the effect is changed. Well, it's interesting. I think that we can kind of comment on this in that we know that there is a new thing called an artifact based on the teaser and the iris card. So if they're creating new things in the game, I feel like that mainstays are still there, because I feel like why create new things when you can iterate on old things? And I don't know if artifact is a new iteration of what an item is, or if it's something altogether new. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But if it is a reiteration of what an item is, then weather could potentially be reiterated on as well. In the same vein, weather. I mean, Damorquis. We talked about how engines become more viable in a lower strength format. So weather arguably could be very, very strong. So it could be weakened in some way or limited in some way. I think there's a lot to discuss, but I don't think that Iris also shows clear hazards. So that's the other thing that's like a dead giveaway, that there's still going to be hazards in the game. So there's that as well. So I'm almost sure that is you shouldn't be too scared about that one there. Nico Bellic is interested in Nova and Shoop, and of course all these huge game-defining cards that would no longer be viable at all, as Shoop couldn't be played. Or, well, I mean, I guess you could still. Nothing is limiting you from putting one-ofs in if Shoop is the same card. But Nova Nova.
It would be much more of a cost for Shoop with a 30-card deck.
It would be harder. Yeah, because you'd also have to slot in everything would have to fit in your salary cap as well. So.
Would it be? Because the cards are actually, they have like different costs, so you could kind of build a deck with a lot of different goals, and if they kind of can stand alone carry you, then it would be still okay, right? Because overall other decks are less synergistic, since their ability to synergize is limited to two pairs of cards and not three, and so Shoop might actually be stronger in this case.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if that is even the thing about if we're seeing like different effects and values, like Shoop had 15 different effects. I have a feeling that if they were reworking cards, that would be maybe not a priority to directly translate. But I mean, hey, ambition is something that CD Projekt Red has tons and tons and tons of. So who's to say? Who's to say? Feral265 asked a question about lower card strength values and stuff. So Feral, we did talk about this. So if you missed the earlier podcast, definitely listen to it again. We talk about our feelings on that kind of thing. Wow, a lot of people throwing in questions here. Rogue Digit wants old Murktabraka back. Yeah, I mean like a precision card, right? Pyramid Head thing. I'm really worried about the low point value of the previewed cards. Thought the entire idea was higher card values, was that they had more knobs to tweak. I mean, that's where I'm coming from, but I think the provision system is what's going to end up being the most tweaked thing, because I think that actually changes what's viable and what's comboable and what's realistic. And if two like really powerful strategies work too well together, you can splice those. Teleria is saying, my concerns are the same as Damorquis with the consistency problem. I have other concerns with the coin flip fix because I didn't like the initiative idea. As a positive, the cards are bigger now, which is great, and the 2 rows are turning out to be more interesting than 3. Teleria, one of the top players on the ladder. Thanks for showing up for the chat. Yeah, coin flip, interesting. No news on that. No news on initiative at this point. So we're not really sure how that's going to go. Phantom X Destiny, hope gold cards have very unique abilities. I would be surprised if they didn't, as I imagine that they'd still be one-ofs. And finally, Nico Bellic is asking a question that I'm going to throw around the table. This will be the last thing we talk about on the podcast here. Breedable Shiny, thanks so much for the sub. Really appreciate it. I'm going to give a shout out to all the commandos here. All the commandos that support us here at patreon.com/commandershorn, and all the people that are in the chat here are commandos or subs in some way. Damorquis got gifted a sub by the Kier. Thanks again for that, Kier. And Damorquis, now you can use all my fantastic Twitch emotes. I'm sure you're very excited. like NA Math, which is a very popular one, I think. So around the table, leaders no longer being cards, but instead units on the board. And judging by the video, don't affect hand size, because I think we saw a hand counter that showed 10 cards, but the leader was not included. So I wonder if that's something like an activated effect, like the other cards with activated effects. But the leaders are also on the board. They aren't cards. Aesthetic and other. Damorquis, what do you think about the loss of cards and the addition of these figures?
I mean, I'm not a big fan, maybe. I have a lot of trust in everything that CDPR does with the game, and I actually like a lot of the newly introduced mechanics, but I really don't like the visuals of the new leaders. I think they just don't look really great, and I know I always liked a clean board. I mean, visual effects can be nice, but what I always value most is I look at my hand, I look at my board, and I know I can start calculating right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have a limited amount of time, and I know this is, I know it's unnecessary. It's maybe nice for some people, but I don't really appreciate it too much.
Yeah. That's fair. Was that the end of the sentence there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure if you cut off. I wasn't sure if there was an additional part of that. I mean, yeah. I mean, like, the thing about it is, for me, is there's two things. There's the question that how much resources are really going into doing these leaders, and as far, because we know that artwork has been a bottleneck before for Gwent, in the premium cards not being released right away with Midwinter and the big influx of cards. So I'm worried that, I know leaders aren't added to the game as often, but resources being allocated to that, I just feel like, again, it's very ambitious. But the other thing is that I think, Damorquis, you're saying that it's not necessary. It's a thing that maybe we weren't asking for. I also think that I rather like the cards. I mean, if this is the way it stays, then I obviously am fine with it. But the cards, like, being on the board there, I mean, the leaders already have such great artwork. It's just interesting to think that they're like, where would we see that artwork for these cards?
Can I add something to my response real quick?
Sure. And then I'll go down to Death Monkey.
Why I don't like it is because when they talked about reworking the game in Homecoming, they said also we wanted to feel a bit darker, more like a card game.
Mm-hmm.
And what Gwent actually is right now, it's not only a card game per se, but it's also kind of a mixture of a card and a board game.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was hoping for is that they make it more darker. You're playing in a tavern, maybe you have like a Mahakam ale at the side, and then you throw the cards on the board and you maybe hear some sounds from the tavern behind, and it feels like you're really playing this card game in a dwarf tavern somewhere in Mahakam. And then you basically play your cards like you would play them in real, and then you have different places where you would play them, I know, in a forest and on the road somewhere, or wherever, but that's what I was hoping for, and I really liked the idea. Maybe I was like already mentally prepared for it, and when I saw the leaders like being actually on the board, I was a bit disappointed, but that was something I would have definitely preferred more.
Death Monkey, how did you feel about the leaders? Did you think they looked okay?
To be honest, no, I didn't like them.
Yeah, this seems to be like a pretty common criticism. This is like the thing when I said that I was going to talk about the things that the community weren't crazy about at the top of the podcast, this was like the main thing. I feel like very few people have been into the leaders. What is it about them that you find aesthetically displeasing, Death Monkey?
Oh, well, first of all, they're under-rendered, but it's not so much about the aesthetic that displeases me. I mean, I do agree with you. I kind of like the card, and I know Berza said that, they're going to have some kind of ability, and that the leader's ability or their relationship to gameplay was going to change in some fascinating, and he said better way. But, I thought that we might see, a leader interact with another leader a little bit more vocally or something with a voice line. I think that those are some of the thoughts, some of the lines I was thinking along.
Right.
This is again tied to my concern. My big concern is, how much are we trading aesthetics for gameplay? and for the competitive edge of the gameplay. And like you said, we didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
So why did they do it?
It's interesting. Like, if you played Magic the Gathering Arena, there are a lot of cards where you play on the board and a 3D model comes out of the card for a brief moment and does like an effect of some kind. I'd be kind of.
I was hoping for something like that.
Yeah,
I thought I don't play Magic, but that's just something that came to me as a non-card designer.
Yeah, like the card's on the board, and you always have the card. When you activate it, the model can come up and do something, and then go back in. And then if the model doesn't look fantastic, I mean, the Magic the Gathering models don't look that great, really. I mean, but it's still like something that occurs that's a wow moment, and it enable, like they kind of take advantage of their digital space for effects and have the things jump out of the cards, and they have a lot of ways to kind of add lots of personality to the cards that are just otherwise static images. But Gwent with the premium cards already is able to do that so well. So having that premium effect on the card, the personality is there. Have them jump out of the card, that would be interesting as well. I mean, it seems like they're already kind of like they're rigging the cards for models kind of anyway. Maybe it could be something like an extension, but I don't know if I'm talking about like months and months and months of art development time. I don't know if anything that I'm saying is even possible, but I think it would look maybe better. Gulo, how did you feel about what you saw with the leaders on the board?
I guess, I mean, yeah, they're not the greatest. I tend to skew way more towards gameplay than aesthetic in just about every facet of a game, so it doesn't bother me all that much. Although if they were just cards as well, that'd be perfectly fine. Because if I remember correct, I think I'm remembering this correctly, but at least way back in closed beta, I mean, leaders were not, well, I think they were playable and then they weren't playable and then they became playable again. I'm not sure. But I know at least one point they weren't a card with a point value, but they still had an effect from what I remember.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that aspect of it. They don't have to be a card on the board that with a power. If they provide an effect, that's fine. They probably could look a little bit better, and it would be nice to somehow. I'm hoping they're going to somehow implement your personal aspect. I mean, you don't really. I mean, you see a little bit of who's playing against who here on the board, but missing those personal avatars and those personal touches you're putting in there, that's got to go on there somewhere as well, I think. So if it's at the expense of a 3D rendered model of the leader, I'm more than fine with that.
One other interesting thing to note is that this is the same studio that develops The Witcher. It's not like a side studio. So they hacked. I mean, I don't know much about the engine. I really don't know anything about developing graphics at all. Just as an armchair comment, I will say that I would imagine that this was something that maybe they could have been testing out because they already had so many models of Witcher characters. I mean, these look specially developed. Here's my embarrassing admission. I still haven't finished Blood and Wine, so I forget what Unseen Elder looks like in game. But I know that Leshen looks like that, or Woodland Spirit. Like I know that's what the Woodland Spirit looks like. And I don't know, like anybody who's finished Blood and Wine, can you just comment? Is Unseen Elder more like floating on a cloud of blood like he is in his card art, or does he have feet? I didn't even think he had feet based on the Gwent artwork.
I can't say if we ever see the Unseen Elder's feet or not. So he may possibly have them, but I can't remember.
Is he behind a bar, or is it just the camera doesn't show him?
It was not in my on top of my mind to remember or look for.
Yeah, I can't say I recall. I will say though that you said the Leshen kind of looks like Woodland Spirit. Woodland Spirit looks a little more badass in my opinion.
From Witcher 3. I mean, they probably. I don't know if they used it at all. The card art. Oh, for the card art. Oh yeah, like the lightning and the stuff, right?
No, he's got more detail. I mean, you can't see what's around this guy's neck. You can't see the skulls and the bones and the talismans from which he draws his power.
Yeah,
right.
Do you even see the front of your own leader? So is he always looking away from you?
Well, no, he looks where your pointer points. So he'll only look at you when you point at your hand, apparently.
I mean.
So I have a lot of issues with that change. I don't know why they did that. We didn't ask for it. I feel like this might be part of that over correction that they might be doing, and maybe they'll. This is great that we have a chance to give them feedback.
Wes, what
And
about
this is
you?
again, this is all armchair criticism on my end as well.
I mean, we're all sitting in our chairs right now, right? We're all sitting in our armchairs. we're all at home.
Not
Speak for
developers.
yourself. I'm swimming.
Oh,
Um,
Wes, what did you think about
No.
those leaders while you swim up to your swim up bar and grab yourself a cocktail?
Yeah, I'm really just going to be echoing people here.
Sure.
As Damorquis said, I think it's slightly distracting. And that's not. You're going to get used to it, but when it does come to that very high level of play where you need to look at your hand, assess what you have, and make a decision, it is a little distracting.
Mm-hmm.
The mechanics of it don't worry me at all. Seeing them have leaders have effects on the board, off the board, be actual cards that you play with value. I'm not that worried about what they actually do as far as the mechanics. I'm confident CDPR is going to figure that out so that I won't be mad about that. But I do, to echo you, McBeard, I do prefer the cards, and I do worry about the work that goes into creating new leaders.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a bottleneck on art, then I would hate for there to be a bottleneck on creating new leaders just because the art takes that much longer. And it is something that you can compare to the new Magic the Gathering game. And when someone brought that up, that made a lot of sense to me, because in that game, you do have certain cards that will jump out of the card and do an effect real quick.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've never looked at those closely enough to say whether I like the way they look or not.
I think they're unnecessary.
Right, yeah. But even in the short video that we saw from CDPR, it was enough for me to look at those and say, I'm not in love with the way that looks.
Yeah.
I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. And it could just be an out of the card effect when it takes place, or, however they end up doing the mechanics. But, and then to echo what Rogue Digit said in chat, it's wasted board real estate, in a game that, in every game now, it's a battle to find, especially McBeard, you know what it's like to be streaming and trying to find a place to, say, put your camera or something like that. Waste real estate seems like such a mistake. But again, that's just my I'm mostly echoing what everybody said, but I would like to see that revised a little bit. But I also want to see what they do with it, because I do trust them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to wrap up this podcast, because I think that, Wes, that final sentence that you just said, I just want to see what they do with it because I trust them. That's the fans are saying that. The fans are saying that because it sounds like we're all fans here. We're not crazy about the 3D leaders. So, I mean, and that was the biggest point of criticism, because I'll tell you that, like I said, we were all in the room with the pro players, with the staff, with the casters, anybody who wasn't immediately involved with the final game that was the Damorquis versus Koloman final set. As it went in past the live band and we saw the board moving, like the 3D and the cards in the hand and how they fanned out, we all did the same thing. We all went, oh, because it was breathtaking. But I think even for the fans, even for the hardcore fans, there is nothing breathtaking about the leader change, whereas everything else is wildly different in front of our eyes and inspire all sorts of interesting thoughts and what ifs. We're kind of more on the side of what if it wasn't like that, and then it's like the only part of it that is like that. And I think that everybody kind of, I'm getting that vibe. So I feel like balanced feedback that we might give in the future can be supported by like stats and facts and gameplay, and even like some personal preference stuff, perhaps quality of life changes. These are all things of feedback that we can all get behind. But when it comes to aesthetics and what clearly goes into, like, I mean, to develop this entirely new game engine is, I mean, again, I don't know a lot about development, all armchair stuff. I am happy with how it looks given how much time has passed. But if they didn't put the time into the leader thing, I wonder where we'd be. And that's like my most honest thing that I'll say. As you guys all know I'm a huge fanboy. So I'm just also not super crazy about the leaders right now. But I will be interested to see how this develops. Maybe it's something that they didn't develop for every faction so far, maybe to see feedback. Maybe it's something like we don't care what they think, this is the direction we want to take it. That's going to be ultimately what happens, because we're going to get a pretty solid opinion on it, especially as we see more as things develop. And we're going to see kind of like how much feedback is important to the future of what we've seen, because it looks like it's already started on a pretty strong path with this one little speck of dust, I would say. That's the leader. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we trust him. WesCisa 2018. Thanks so much, Wes, for coming on the program. Gulo-X2, also known as Gulox2, the king of Skellige, with over 4,700 Skellige victories. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast as well. Death Monkey, my friend from Wild Hunt, another bearded Gwent player that I have the pleasure of meeting, one of the most pleasant dudes I've ever met. Death Monkey, thanks for finding the time to come on into the channel. And Damorquis, a spontaneous little guest, winner of Challenger 4. I mean, what a great time for you to come on the podcast. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Do you have any shout-outs? If you have any shout-outs about Twitter, or if you stream, or if you have anything you want to promote, Damorquis, you can lead things off.
Well, I think I have given all of my shoutouts already on Challenger.
Yeah.
But I could give one shoutout, and if I could give one shoutout right now, it would be probably to you. Just want to thank you for the great cast of the finals. I had the chance to rewatch it 10,000 times at home because it was such a great series. I mean, some of the games were already like decided by the matchups. That was already expected, but game 1 and game 5 were insane. Like game 1 with the 180 point Olaf, and then just game 5 with me having the 3 engines ticking every turn, and then bricking this Dennis, bricking the DJ, finding the points, just barely edging out on Andy. It was insane to watch, and also the casting was great. I have like my favorite moments from you that I definitely need to clip, like, is it enough? Or when I pulled the mage with the Stannis, oh, that's not good. And so I memorized those already. You can see that I watch them pretty often. And also one thing maybe. So today I wrote, or yesterday I wrote it. Today I published it. Kind of analysis or insight how I actually worked on the lineup, and it's a very detailed article. And I recommend everyone who is interested in competitive Gwent right now, or who would like to get behind the mind of someone, or of Andy and me, how we prepared for the Challenger, check it out on our teamaretusa.com homepage. It's a really good read, and it's pretty analytical, so everyone who is into stats or into quantitative approaches to the game will love it.
I'll put the link in the show notes for you, Damorquis. So if you're listening to this on audio, you'll be able to find it there. It'll link you to the article itself. Death Monkey, any shout-outs for you? You're not a streamer. You're more of a player and a fan. But if you have any shout-outs or anything like that, what do you think?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Actually, I've got to correct you on something, but I've actually just started streaming in this last week.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I do have a Twitch account. You guys can find me there at twitch.tv/deathmonkey1984. I've just started streaming. If I'm going live tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Cool.
I do that every night right now, and we're just getting started. So if you want to come on over, we do more analytical kind of stuff there. We're pushing for GM this month. We're gonna get it before they change Gwent. That's the goal. But enough about that. My shout out, I wanted to give it to you, McBeard, for also doing such an awesome job. I got 2 shout-outs. One to McBeard for congratulations on 2 years of this podcast, which he did live.
That's true.
That was amazing.
Last podcast was about as official as a 2-year mark as it could be. I tried to get Greyboxer then, and I think I was trying to get Greyboxer then. I definitely tried to see if he was free for this one, but Greyboxer, I told him to book November 8th, because if I miss every day, if I hit every date every Thursday from here on, that's episode 100, and Greyboxer's going to be on that one. So, but yeah, 2 years of the podcast, pretty crazy. Thanks.
Yeah, congratulations. And so my second shout out is to Damorquis himself for winning the Challenger. I've heard rumors that you might be retiring from esports, and I hope that we will see you again. In fact, thanks for inspiring a generation of players.
That's really kind for you to say.
Gulo, well, actually, Damorquis, are you retiring now, or are you just going to wait until final Masters at this point?
I'm actually working full time right now, so I'm not gonna play for a while. But I will definitely come back since I already qualified for 2 upcoming events. So I don't want to disappoint on those. I'm gonna prepare, guys.
Right on. Gulo, someone who streams a lot and definitely plays a ton of Skellige. Gulox, where can people find you when you're streaming as the King of Skellige, or perhaps a Dragon Hunter of Skyrim? You do your fair share of gaming.
A little bit. I do a lot of things, but we've been playing a lot of Gwent recently. Twitter and Twitch are both Gulo ×2, GuloX2. And my shout outs are just the same as everyone else. Congrats again to Damorquis, a wonderful showing in Challenger, and as always, McBeard as a stable, stalwart rock of the Gwent community.
Thanks so much.
We are damn lucky to have you, sir.
Thank
and I'm happy this is still kicking around and is great as always. So that's all I got to say. See you around, everyone.
I mean, it's funny you say great as always, but this has just been a very different episode, and I think that this has been one of my favorites. We're well over 2 hours right now, talking about all things Homecoming and Challenger 4, and this has been a pleasure. Wes, thanks for helping out with some modding duties as well in the channel, in Twitch chat, and for also participating on the podcast. Wes, you did it all today. Any shout outs from your end? Wes may not be present. Oh, there he is.
No, sorry.
Maybe mute.
Press my mute button like 12 times there. Yeah, sure. I streaming myself, twitch.tv/WesCisa. I am super sick right now, so I don't think that I will be streaming this week, but definitely check me out if you get a chance. Twitter is the same name, WesCisa. And then, I just really want to give a shout out to McBeard, killing it at the Challenger, along with Watch Flake, another caster that I'm close with. You guys did fantastic as always, and congratulations on the 2 years. And I think that's all I got.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, Flake, close personal friend of mine. Flake was actually at my wedding. Is like a brother from another mother with my wife, La Vegetaliana. So to do the event with him, and I've known him for 5 years at this point, IRL, like before Gwent was even a thing. To actually have this sort of, I mean, we share a lot of common interests. It's like to be able to actually have things evolve and to be able to share that with him was for him to actually throw to me, like he opened the show with Ash Lizzle and then threw to Mogwai and I for the first match. Again, that amazing Tailbot versus Game King match. Oh man, watch it. That moment was a special moment. I couldn't really believe it was happening at the time. So I also would like to give a little shout out to my boy Flake. And of course, a shout out to Damorquis for winning the Challenger and for being a hell of a dude, and for Team Aretuza doing so well. Really, all eight of the broadcasts, well, all 7 excluding myself, 7 of the other broadcasters / analysts, and all of the 8 pro players made for an absolutely fantastic weekend. And I said it before, and I'll say it again: one of the best weekends of my life, and the best tournament Gwent's ever had, I think. So I would like to give a shout out to everybody who watched that and made that show the best it could ever be. Also, I do stream from time to time, a little less than usual, but I am going to keep up the Thursday streams. I'm going to keep up the Thursday streams here for the podcast, as it seems to be kind of a nice little fit right now. So you can find me at McBearded, twitch.tv/McBearded. Follow me on Twitter, where I update on almost everything I do, at McBeardCH. And also on YouTube, where this gets uploaded, I am McBeard over there as well. And this counts as my Homecoming review, but you can expect a lot more reviews as more news leaks out on YouTube. I'll be jumping back in as the Homecoming news cycle starts. And the podcast is always going to be piping hot, because who knows? Every week we might get something insane to talk about. I hope that's the case. But I think that this is going to be it. Gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. Everybody in the chat, thanks for joining. This was a fun one for sure. I am going to wrap it up. In fact, I'm just going to leave. I'll leave the channel here, and I'm going to play the outro music. And thanks, everybody, guys. Hope you have a fantastic evening, and I will see you very soon. Take care, my friends. And I'm going to play, I'll just gracefully go into this outro music right here. Thanks again, everybody. Of course, it's already playing. It's already playing on the actual Spotify. So best of luck on the path, my friends.